Hello, I'm Dr. Kia Jane Richmond from Northern Michigan University's English Department. In this amazing NCTE session, Anna Roseboro and Roz Roseboro will discuss how they use their individual prior work experiences to help participants better develop lesson plans, assessment tools, and a positive classroom environment for college writers. You'll have time during the session to write quick journal reflections and post questions for closing Q&A time. Anna draws on her extensive background as a secondary English teacher, college instructor, and author of multiple textbooks for educators, as well as being an award-winning mentor active in state and national English teacher organizations such as NCTE, ELATE, and CEL. Roz brings her knowledge of research, analysis, and report writing from her professional career in telecommunications and marketing to mix with college writing instruction strategies that she learned from Northern Michigan University's composition training program while an NMU Master of Fine Arts candidate. What makes their presentation unique is their powerful relationship as mother and daughter, which was enhanced by the adoption of a mentor-novice relationship. During the past 2 years, Anna and Roz used frequent phone calls, emails, and personal visits to share knowledge and explore rubrics and create assignment sheets to aid in providing students with opportunities to think critically while constructing knowledge through the written word, whether in traditional essay format, non-traditional compositions, or in multimodal presentations. I invite you to listen in as Anna and Roz teach us today, and to stay tuned for more strategies and stories shared by the wonderful co-presenters in this NCTE session. They will be joined by Tiffany Stochnik, Shanika Carter, Nanapit Limlamai, Jose Luis Cano, Mara Lee Grayson, and respondent Claudia Marshall. Thank you and enjoy the session.
Welcome. I'm glad you've decided to spend some time hearing about what it's like to be a new educator and how veteran educators can help the new ones. I will share what my experience has been like as a mid-career first-time educator, including some of the challenges I faced and what I did to overcome those challenges. You'll hear from a few others as we go along. My first goal for this session is to show new educators that you're not alone. I've been blessed with a mother who is willing and able to provide guidance, encouragement, and support as I continue to find my way as a new educator. I've also got the support of my fellow grad students and the faculty in my department. But even if you don't have these things, you still have a network of people in organizations like NCTE who want to see you succeed. Sessions like this are but one way to tap into the collective knowledge of veteran educators. Secondly, I'd like to build your confidence as a new educator. I know some in my cohort were nervous about getting up in front of a group of freshmen because they were only a few years away from being freshmen themselves. But trust me, we all feel like imposters at first. We really do. Over time, as you start to get your sea legs under you, so to speak, your confidence will grow. As I told some of my friends, fake it till you make it. I hope that knowing everyone feels nervous will help you feel less so. Continuing along those lines, I want you to know that your struggles are common, expected, and manageable. I hope that hearing from me and others during this session will give you some tools and techniques that will help. And as I said, there are lots of people rooting for you and will gladly share their wisdom with you. All you have to do is ask. Some of these tools and techniques will be around classroom management, probably the single biggest challenge for new educators. That first day when you walk into a classroom and see a couple dozen pairs of eyes looking at you can be overwhelming. I know that the 2 weeks I was in teacher boot camp were filled with anxiety about how it would all come together. I'm happy to say that it does get better over time. That's not to say there aren't still hiccups and days when my plans are mostly discarded after 10 minutes, because there are. What does get better is your ability to roll with it and make the best of the situation. I hope you enjoyed the session we pulled together for you and look forward to connecting with you during the Q&A later. Now we'll hear from my mother, Anna Roseboro, with a welcome message to experienced educators and a discussion about the importance of mentoring.
Most veteran educators will acknowledge that it was someone in their early years who encouraged them to stay the course despite the bumps in the road. This early idea of a mentor is not new. Most of you came across it when you were studying Greek mythology, the study of Odysseus, who had a friend mentor whom Odysseus asked to train his son Telemachus. For the most part, in literature and in history, a mentor is an older, experienced person who is assisting a younger person just starting out in his career. Please don't think we are suggesting that one must be old to be a mentor or young to be mentored. You'll find today in the people who are going to be sharing their stories, singing their songs of themselves, are young teachers, early career, and some mid-career. As we begin, however, I want to share 3 examples from my own experience. I am an older veteran teacher. I didn't stay the course without the assistance of others along the way. The first example, he was a tall, broad-shouldered teacher who worked across the hall from me. He taught math to the students I taught in 8th grade English. I left the room that day in tears after a confrontation with a student. It was a frustrated girl who, when I addressed her behavior, she grabbed me by the collar and lifted my 5'8" physique 2 inches from the floor. I left in tears. This man comforted me. Of course, he heard the noise, came out to see what was going on. He saw me in tears, he comforted me. And then he counseled me. He had said, get back in the room. You must get the class under control if you're ever going to teach them. After a pat on the shoulder, I walked back into the room. Over the next few days, even weeks, he and I talked, and I learned a little better classroom management. A second occurred after I came back from a conference, all excited about a new classroom strategy. I was going to use art to teach English. My colleagues laughed. Parents challenged me, thought I was watering down the curriculum by using art. However, my department chair came to my rescue. She buffered me. She challenged me, asking me what I was doing and why I was doing it. But over time, she began to copy, complimenting me because my students came to her classes very well prepared to study. The third example came from a colleague who invited me to co-chair at a convention. We taught in a humanities program where we collaborated in an interdisciplinary manner, in that when we were studying early civilizations and say in history and in English, we also invited teachers in math, science, art, and even music to collaborate with us on programs to reinforce some of the concepts that we were asking the students to learn. This colleague coached me how to prepare a proposal, how to design an interactive presentation that would be engaging for the participants, how to prepare useful handouts. Yes, we used handouts back then. and how to dress in ways that would show respect for the profession. In each case, these mentors commiserated with me, counseled with me, challenged me, copied me, collaborated with me, and coached me. We encourage any of you, wherever you are in your career, when you have an opportunity, be a mentor, share what you know, encourage those who are just starting out, those who have been on the path for some time. Take a moment now. Think of someone in your career who has fulfilled this role as a mentor. Write down their names, men, women, who helped you. As you're thinking about this, remember that much of the mentoring can be done online now. We can't let COVID or anything else stop those of us who have a heart for mentoring from doing so. As our presentation continues today, you're going to hear from some early career educators sharing their stories, adding their harmony to the songs of ourselves. Take a moment, write your names, and then listen to Marie Grayson, who will share her story. Mara Lee Grayson will be next.
Hi, I'm Mara Lee Grayson. I'm an assistant professor of English at California State University, Dominguez Hills. This is my 11th year teaching. I started teaching in the second year of my MFA program. I was a fiction writer and poet, and I was assigned a course called Writing for Engineers. I loved being in the classroom, but I realized quickly that I was in over my head. I was part of a cohort of instructors who were teaching Writing for Engineers and other engineering-focused writing courses, technical writing, a freshman inquiry seminar on engineering. That helped, but I didn't feel fully supported until I entered my PhD program, I think 3 years later. When I got my first full-time faculty position in 2016, I was, for lack of a better word, I was lonely. My husband traveled for work, which gave me tons of time to write, and I wrote my first book. But I didn't feel supported on my campus. My work is all in anti-racism and racial equity, and that was not exactly encouraged in the department I was in at the time. I've had formal mentors, like advisors and professors, and more informal mentors, like colleagues I've trusted. And through them and through my participation in organizations like NCTE, I found that there are people doing the type of work I care about all across the country. That makes so much of it so much less lonely. I don't think I've figured out anything about work-life balance. Yoga helps, and it helps to love what I do. And it helps to have a husband who works a lot as well, because then I get to do it. The main thing I've learned from working with mentors and mentoring others is that we need to find community and a sense of belonging in our field. It doesn't work if we don't. And that community for me has always been with other people who resist all of the things that make so many of us feel like outsiders.
It's always challenging the first time you try something new, and teaching is no exception. You're responsible for so much. You need to develop activities that will engage, excite, and ideally educate your students. You don't always know what they already know, and of course not everyone comes to you with the same skill levels, so it can be a tricky balancing act. You're responsible for developing a syllabus that spells out the requirements for your class, explains the policies and procedures, describes the major assignments, and anything else that establishes the covenant between you and your students. You may be required to select mentor texts and materials that demonstrate what the students should aspire to, and the universe of possibilities can feel endless and overwhelming. You've got to manage the precious minutes with those students while you're together in the classroom or online together in a virtual one. Equally challenging, if not more so, is managing your time outside of the classroom. When you first start off, you feel like there's never enough time to do everything you feel you need to do, and it's tempting to devote a ton of time to planning and not enough time to recharging. You need to facilitate and generate class discussions. I'd say this was and remains one of the most difficult things for me to do. It takes a while for students to feel comfortable with you and with their classmates. But once they do, watching them interact with each other makes whatever stress you felt feel worth it. Lastly, there's grading. You need to decide what to grade, how to give feedback. It too can feel overwhelming during the planning stages and once classes are underway. I hope that new educators are now thinking, I'm glad to know it's not just me. And I expect veteran educators are nodding their heads as they recall their early experiences. Next, my mom will provide insights and suggestions on how to approach these and other challenges.
My daughter Roz has mentioned a few of the major changes for new classroom instructors. Whether you're a graduate teaching assistant, graduate student instructor, or first-time adjunct instructor at a community college, the issue probably will be managing time. Two of the most time-consuming tasks for novice and veteran educators alike is managing grades and providing feedback to students. We will share strategies for your consideration, knowing that each college setting is a little different. We know that your issues may be a little different, but these ideas are worth considering. No student should be surprised by grades earned during your course. You can avoid or reduce that likelihood by introducing general grading guidelines right away. Most students simply want to know what will it take to get a grade in your class. It should not be a secret, so tell them. A C means the assignment includes all the components outlined on the assignment sheet. A B means the work is complete and correct. There are minimum distracting elements in terms of graphics and mugs, mechanics, usage, grammar, and spelling. An A is an acknowledgement that the student's work is complete, correct, and creative. There's something novel or unexpected that enhances the overall presentation. A D means something is missing. Again, it's your responsibility to provide written guidelines that students can use to confirm what they turn in and then check when they receive a D. An F means they failed to present a lesson to be graded. C, complete. B, complete and correct. A, complete, correct, and creative. And there you have it, general grading guidelines. Take a moment now to write in your notes or journal ways you can adapt this model in the weeks left in this term, or that you can incorporate in your next course. Students develop more confidence and competence when they understand what they're expected to be learning and have criteria they can use to measure their own learning. Some colleges do provide a set of evaluation criteria that you can share. Others expect you to provide it. And I'd like to share with you something that's been around for decades that can help you when you are providing assignments for students to give feedback on in-progress work and to use when you're grading or evaluating final papers, presentations, or products. Providing this information can be time-consuming. Most new college instructors ask, how do I manage? What materials must I find or adapt? How can I communicate consistently with students about their written and oral communication? Do you remember these? Ideas, sentence fluency, organization, voice, word choice, conventions. Yeah, the 6 traits rubric. They work in college too. We want to give you a couple of ideas of ways you can customize the traditional 6 traits rubric. Let's say you've assigned a typical argumentative essay, and you require a minimum number of resources that the students show the significance of the problem, a minimum number of resources, have a minimum number of images, and that they must use the citation style at your university. And in order to be complete, to earn a C, each of these elements must be present. How would you customize a rubric? Look at the typical layout for the ideas and comment. Your written assignment will have shown the components required. The rubric shows the traits a complete assignment must exhibit. Your customized rubric will have your added specific traits. During peer feedback time, students can use this rubric to provide comments on how well their classmates have done so far. Encourage students to use the language in the rubric when they write comments, whether they are doing them in Word or Google Drive, or whether they are giving them orally in an app like Flipgrid. Let's say you have organized an assignment and want them to reflect that organizational strategy. For instance, attention to the problem, a need to solve the problem, the satisfaction one would get if the problem were solved, a visualization of what life would be like if the opportunity arose to take the action called for by the writer. For the conventions on the section that talks about correctness, after you've reviewed the citation style required at your university, it would be useful to add that to the customized rubric. No, no, no. It is not necessary to customize each of the 6 traits for every assignment. It is helpful for you as you create each assignment to know what you're measuring. Decide what to include on the rubric helps you focus your thinking on what you're teaching. And having a customized rubric reminds students to check for the required components when they submit that paper, that presentation, or that product for your evaluation. Take a few moments now. How could you customize the rubric for the classes you're currently teaching or one you're preparing to teach next term?
I am Shanika Carter, and I am an adjunct instructor for a couple community colleges, both MCC. One is from Muskegon Community College, and the other is from Montcalm Community College, both here in Michigan. So being an adjunct, and I have been doing it consistently for both schools since 2018. So it's been a little bit over 2 years, went by real fast, and I feel like I've been doing it much longer. But with that being said, no complaints at all. It has been an enjoyable experience. I've noticed my involvement with it. Starting off, I was following a particular guideline, syllabus, curriculum for the departments that I work in. And what I teach, I work in the communications departments for both schools, teaching communications, which includes interpersonal and speech. And for my local school here in Muskegon Community College, I also teach a course for incoming college students, teaching them how to be successful in their college journey. So for both of those, I have had people that I worked with that have mentored me and prepared me, but also encouraged me to, incorporate my own activities and things or ideas that I come up with. And so over time, I have done that, including more issues that pertain to our society now, and having good feedback from that. With the one school, Montcalm, and this is the only instance where I can think of challenges. It has been the fact that there's not much diversity with the student population, although I see it growing a bit. But when it comes to me being a teacher and instructor of color and talking about such issues with communications and culture and diversity, I do have to nudge a little bit to get that participation, but it's gotten to a point now where it comes a bit easier, and I just actually am amazed at the feedback that I do get once the students open up. Besides that, though, it has been a great opportunity, learning each school's style of teaching. Not a challenge, but just an adjustment. So I do look forward to what's to come in my teaching career. Thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Now I'd like to share some strategies that have worked for me to overcome the challenges I discussed earlier. When developing activities, consider what the goal of the activity is. It could be to practice a skill. It could be to assess what they've learned. It could be to introduce a new concept. Some, though, are intended to build community. This last may seem like a nice to have, but in my experience, building community is an aspect of my teaching approach that my students really appreciate. Of course, you need to consider how much time it will take. When you execute the activity is also important. You'll get a feel for when your class has the most energy or needs a boost, so plan accordingly. Also, think about what materials and technology you'll need. Especially since we've had to do more online, technology can be a particular challenge because you don't always know what technology students have outside of the classroom, and tools like Zoom can occasionally act up. You can only anticipate so much, so being flexible and having a sense of humor will go a long way. And don't forget to think about when to hand the materials to the students. I found out the hard way that even if you place a worksheet face down and tell them not to look at it, they're going to look at it and not pay attention to what you're saying in the meantime. It's important to remember that you don't have to come up with the activities by yourself. You can ask an experienced educator at your school or online. If you're a graduate teaching assistant, you can ask others in your cohort or program. I've found that most of my peers are more than happy to share things with me if I ask for them. Some textbooks have accompanying instructor guides with activities. And I mentioned before, searching online, but here are a few sites that you might want to check out for starters. The first is my mom's site that includes information from the books she's published on teaching English language arts. The Read, Write, Think site that is developed by NCTE and the International Literacy Association makes free classroom resources available. They target K through 12, but there's plenty that can be adapted for college environments as well. Lastly, the Modern Language Association site also has free activities and resources. Different schools have different policies around developing a syllabus. Most, though, will have some combination of these elements. What will vary is what is predefined and what is up to each educator to decide. What I'm showing here is how it works for me at Northern Michigan. The core principles and expected outcomes are driven by the writing program administrator's recommendations. These, in turn, drive the major assignments, like essays, reports, and presentations. We are given university statements and policies around ADA, support for veterans, accommodations, plagiarism, and the like. My first semester, we were told what textbooks to use. Subsequently, that decision was left to me. The minor assignments, like journals, daily writing assignments, discussion boards, and chats, tend to be up to you. You may also be able to define your own policies around accepting late assignments, what behavior is expected in the classroom, attendance, and eating and drinking during class. Your syllabus will also include grading and evaluation criteria. You can also include the due dates for major assignments. I mark mine as tentative as things sometimes move around, but students appreciate seeing what to expect over the course of the term. This last topic, guiding principles and culture, may not be required, but it's something one of my mentors suggested. It's a good way for you to clarify in your mind what your priorities are and for you to communicate that to students from the beginning. When choosing mentor texts, it's important to consider your intent and timing. Are you looking to introduce students to a new type of content, like a persuasive essay? Are you looking for an example for them to use as a model for their own work? Using textbooks that have readers make life a lot easier. They can be a bit more expensive, and I know not all new educators have control over textbook selection, but in my experience, it's been worth it. That's not to say, though, that you can't use content you find online. You just want to make sure you're pulling from reputable sources. One approach that has worked well for me is to have students find texts and videos. First off, this gives them agency. They also find content that is interesting and relevant to them, making them more likely to engage with it. Plus, it means less work for you. Any place you can reduce your load without sacrificing quality, you do it. Managing time in the classroom is something that definitely improves over time. You begin to get a feel for how time ebbs and flows, especially if you maintain a similar structure or order of activities from class to class. I found that it helps to have a printed schedule of activities. This forces you to estimate how much time each task or activity will take. Use your phone to set alarms for in-class assignments and to signal 5 minutes left in the period. As I mentioned earlier, do your best to be flexible. Inevitably, something will take more or less time than you planned for. It's usually fine to let something slip into the next class, so if students are really engaged, don't feel pressure to end it just because of time. On the flip side, it's a good idea to have something in reserve in case you find yourself with extra time. Outside of the classroom, it's much more of a matter of preference, I think. What's worked for me is to grade major assignments promptly and grade homework and in-class assignments once a week. That's my goal, at least. Sometimes I do end up doing a couple weeks worth of homework at a time. One thing that is easy to say but hard to do, especially when you first start out, is set limits. I know it's tempting to spend 4 hours searching for the perfect mentor text, but resist the urge. This last one is something my mom told me right when I started. Make sure there was one day in the week that you don't do any planning or grading. Again, it's tempting to want to take care of that pile of papers, but trust me, you'll be glad you let them sit for a day, especially if you use that day to recharge. Self-care is an important part of avoiding burnout. And I suppose maybe this is more about managing stress than time, but in any event, it's a worthwhile habit. Getting students to speak up in the classroom is a big challenge, but a rewarding activity once you crack the code. Starting out, GTAs especially get tasked with teaching freshmen. In their first semester of school, perhaps away from home for the first time, many students are insecure about whether they belong. It takes them a while to trust you as their teacher as well as their peers. So start with easy stuff. Icebreakers are a great way to do this. It builds community when everyone offers up a little bit of themselves to the group. I aim to do a few of them early on in the semester. You can also do activities with low-stake topics so students are confident that they know the content. It's hard sometimes to tolerate the silence that comes after you ask a question. The students need time to think before they speak, so let it go a minute or two before prompting or calling on someone. Even better, give them dedicated time to think about the topic and write their thoughts down ahead of time. Once that's done, though, don't hesitate to ask specific students for their thoughts. Students will try to avoid making eye contact with you so you don't call on them, but after they see that that won't stop you, they'll be more likely to show you when they're really prepared to talk. A couple last things that I learned from my mom and one of my fellow GTAs. The first is student starters. This is when a student spends a few minutes at the beginning of class talking about something they found outside of the classroom that was discussed during class. The second is asking students to write down 3 things they learned from their homework and be prepared to share with the rest of the class. It's a good way to give them agency, and it also helps you assess learning. I compile them and post them to our learning platform so they can access them later. Grading can take up a ton of time, but there are ways to minimize it. First, though, it's important to remember that you should make clear to students what is graded as opposed to what is counted. For example, I give grades to assignments like essays and presentations. I don't give specific grades to homework and in-class writing, but in aggregate, both count toward the overall grade. Unless your school has a policy around it, I suggest not grading homework. It makes a lot of work for you if you do. Plus, you want to encourage students to try and practice new things. If they knew everything was going to be assessed, they'd be more likely to play it safe, or worse, not try at all. For major assignments, I recommend using a rubric. Students appreciate knowing exactly what is required. Also, it makes giving feedback more straightforward because you can use the language of the rubric. Now I'd like you to take a moment to think about what strategies you've used or could use in your next class. I'm hopeful that each of you found at least a few nuggets that you can take back with you to the classroom. And for more ideas and reflection from other new educators, we'll next hear from another Northern Michigan GTA and a community college instructor discussing rhetorical bilingualism.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tiffany Stagnick. I'm a current graduate teaching assistant at Northern Michigan University in Marquette, Michigan, which is a rural four-year university in Michigan's beautiful Upper Peninsula. My first year of being a graduate teaching assistant was not actually my first year of teaching. However, it was my first year of teaching to a curriculum, which meant I learned very quickly fancy terms like outcomes and the writing program administration. And it was a real challenge for me because a lot of the outcomes I didn't quite know how to teach. In particular, I struggled with teaching genre in a way that was not completely mind-numbingly boring for my students. So what I elected to do was seek advice. And this is my biggest takeaway from my first year of teaching. I sought advice from an expert in genre-based pedagogy at my university. Her name is Dr. Madeline Pavlovsky, and she gave me so many ideas as to how to teach genre effectively and in a more student-centered manner. She told me to use examples of student essays and to have students workshop together and find structure conventions, language conventions, and design conventions together. And because of her advice, I ended up having more fruitful lessons, both for myself and for my students. So my number one piece of advice to any new educator is definitely to ask for help, both from your colleagues and from more seasoned educators, such as Anna Roseboro. Thank you so much for having me at the annual conference of the National Council of Teachers of English, and I hope you have an excellent conference experience. Bye.
Rhetorical bilingualism. I taught at a predominantly Latina community college in Brownsville, Texas. While the school doesn't keep statistics of students who speak bilingually, a quick walkthrough of the institution reveals its presence. The Composition 1 course focused on edited American English, but the Composition 2 course leaned heavily toward rhetorical theory. Consequently, in the Composition 2 course, I made use of the rhetorical concept of audience for an assignment, where I invoked a bilingual audience through the construction of a poster with a refrán or dicho, which is a proverb. I assigned this project toward the end of the semester because by that time, students had built a familiarity with concepts in rhetorical theory, and they were used to discussing certain terms, namely audience. As an educator, I chose this particular assignment because it made use of a linguistic dexterity that most students possess, and imagines an entirely different audience than an academic one. Yet, students who felt uncomfortable could still create the poster in English only. I had come across Cruz Medina's Nuestros Refranes, culturally relevant writing in Tucson high schools, so I adapted the idea to field a multimodal text in my classroom. In groups of 2 or 3, I asked students to identify a refrán, a proverb. Then they had to write it out on a poster, which a Spanish-speaking audience would understand. They also had to create a visual on the poster, which would convey the same message for a non-Spanish-speaking audience. The final product was a poster with the written refrán and a corresponding visual. For example, one poster read, "No todo lo que brilla es oro." Not everything that shines is gold. The visual component included a sketch of a golden poop, which I found comical. The refrán cautions against falling for situations that seem too good at first, but may end up being otherwise. I had a lot of fun reading and learning from the posters. I expected some resistance from students in my course about using Spanish in a composition course, but only a handful of students decided to write their words of wisdom in English. This comfort toward this bilingual assignment probably stemmed from my insistence on bringing in the external community as an audience throughout the semester. This approach probably translates well to areas in the Southwest US or where linguistic diversity exists. Next time, I'd have to reconsider if I want to include a digital option for a poster. Overall, I enjoy this assignment for it used the linguistic and community knowledge that students possess and seldom appear in the college classroom. As a bilingual educator, I enjoyed knowing that I helped my students develop the full scope of rhetorical agility.
Another time-consuming task for new college instructors has to do with management. The question is, how do I structure in-class time for students to provide feedback on the in-progress work of their peers? What instructions do I give them that will work in class or for homework? The question students ask, what should I be looking for when I comment on the writing of my classmates? How should I word my responses so my comments are both courteous and useful? You, their instructor, can help. One tool to consider is using a version of the traditional 6 traits rubric that you customize for individual assignments. That means you're just starting with something familiar, then tailoring it to fit your needs. Make it a management tool that works for you. One way to use the customized rubrics is to have students refer to those rubrics as they read and provide feedback for their peers. Your challenge as a classroom teacher, online or in class, is to design online or in-class meeting times for students to provide such feedbacks while you can observe how well they navigate the assignment, the technology, and the learning platform used at your college or university. Consider organizing in color groups. Students simply sign up or are assigned to groups of 5 students each. Each student then will be required to respond to the writing of at least 3 people in their assigned groups. From having done this in class 2 or 3 times, you know that this will take 30 to 50 minutes to complete at home. How would the color groups work? Those in the red group respond to their choice of students in the blue group. Blue to green, green to purple, purple to orange, and orange to red. Having done this in class a couple of times or in live virtual class meetings in Zoom rooms, the students will have a good sense of how much time it'll take them to handle this assignment at home. Next, students respond to their choice of 3 classmates in their assigned group, and they use the general or customized rubric to focus their attention on 2 traits for each of 3 classmates. For example, classmate A would respond to traits 1 and 2. For classmate B, traits 3 and 4. And for classmate C, traits 5 and 6. Encourage students to use the language of the rubric in their comments. Their main question is, how well is this classmate reflecting the traits on the assigned rubric? The last step in this assignment is to have students review the peer comments written to them. Then upload their own specific plan, stating how they plan to improve the contents, improve the organization, and any other trait you point out for this particular assignment. Again, having that rubric in front of them, they know things that they can do to make their next draft better. This looks overwhelming. You're probably asking yourself, what do I do with all this writing? You read it to determine what students know and what you must do to clarify what they don't know yet. You will commend them in the next class meeting for what they've done well and suggest ways for them to apply what they're learning from the reading of their drafts of their peers and the comments that they have gotten from their peers. You can do this. After doing it 2 or 3 times in class or in virtual class meetings, and it's clear to students that they understand the process, you'll be surprised how much they come to appreciate this opportunity to learn from their peers and have time to apply that learning to their next assignment before you read it and grade it. But how do I grade this? Simply give full credit for students who respond to their peers and upload their revision plan on time. So as you're preparing and assigning homework, Decide why the time you've taken to give the assignment and the time your students will spend on it can be rationalized. Is it to practice something you've taught? To prepare for the next class meeting? To polish a paper, presentation, or product to present? Or simply to ponder their learning so far? All are valid reasons for assigning homework. Now take a moment to write in your notes or your journal ways you can adapt this peer feedback model in the weeks left in this term, or that you can incorporate in your next course.
Hi, my name is Nana Pitlim-Lamai, and I'm a PhD candidate in the Joint Program in English and Education at the University of Michigan. In thinking about teaching transitions, I seem to have two transitions into college teaching. The first was when I arrived back in graduate school, and the second was when I started teaching classes related to my research interests. As part of my funding package, I taught first-year composition my first year in graduate school. Because I had just come from 13 years of teaching high school English, the last 7 of which I taught AP Lang, the AP equivalent of first-year comp, I felt comfortable with the content. I was nervous, though, about whether the teaching strategies I used as a high school teacher, things like think, pair, share, other kinds of group work, color-coding essays, would be seen as too elementary for college students. But they loved those kinds of things. They felt like the interactivity of the class was different from their other classes, and they enjoyed getting to know each other through our class activities and discussions. This kind of community was helpful when students met in writing groups throughout the semester, too. Although my university has a robust preparation and support program for new instructors, I didn't feel like the strategies and conversations differentiated for instructors like me, who had already been teaching before they returned to school. I asked a mentor to observe me and offer feedback on my college-level teaching, but if I had to do it again, I would have asked more mentors, particularly those in the School of Education, to observe my teaching and offer feedback. I also think I would have benefited had I created a support network among colleagues in my program, all of whom have teaching experience. I was pretty isolated that first year, and I felt kind of out of place and uncomfortable as a graduate student, so I leaned into teaching, something I was immensely comfortable and identified with, probably spending way too much time preparing for my classes and offering feedback on student work. I should have been more proactive in seeking support. And I wish my mentors would have been more proactive too in asking about how I was using strategies I knew and learned as a secondary teacher in my post-secondary classrooms. My second transition into college-level teaching has been in my 5th year of graduate school, this year, when I started teaching classes related to my research. I study secondary ELA methods classes and how we prepare pre-service teachers to foster justice in their classrooms through their curricular, pedagogical, and assessment choices. I have observed several methods classes, and my research also involves following pre-service teachers from their methods classrooms into their student teaching classrooms to see how university preparation translates into real-time teaching. Because this is an area of research for me, I also felt relatively comfortable with the content, but I find that I've been putting a lot of pressure on myself to, quote, get it right, since I conduct and read research on success and shortcomings to preparing pre-service teachers. This year, and in this transition to teaching, I'm trying to put everything into perspective. I know that methods courses are but one place teachers learn how to teach, and I know that I will improve as a methods instructor over time. In my own research, and in reading the research of others, I have a sense of what works. I'm trying to use that and my knowledge of my students to support their learning of how to teach English. The last thing that I've tried to maintain in my teaching as a high school teacher to a college instructor is that I'm trying to, what Carla Shalaby says, be love to my students in her 2017 Troublemakers. I want to be love not just because we're in a pandemic and also surfacing racial injustice in a very public way, but because I want to model in my teaching the kind of care I want my students to have towards their own students. I want to nurture my students, love on them, productively challenge them, push them to do their best work, not for themselves, but for the students they teach. Developing strong rapport with my students and using their interests and needs to shape my instruction have been two sources of strength right now, and I think my students appreciate it too.
Hi, I'm Marilee Grayson. I'm an assistant professor of English at California State University, Dominguez Hills. Early on in my career, which is going on about 11 years now, I realized that even though academia may teach us about our field, it doesn't always teach us how to navigate that field or how to navigate academia. My earliest mentors, most of whom were my professors and advisors, taught me how to apply for a job, how to write a cover letter, how to format my CV. Over time, the type of mentoring that I've needed has changed, and the mentors themselves have changed. Now they tend to be more senior scholars in the field, more senior scholars in my own department. And a lot of the mentoring actually is more affective than it is practical. So for those of us whose work is all about social justice and anti-racism, we take the work home with us. It doesn't go away. And at the end of the day, my mentors remind me that I have to be a whole person, not just a teacher, not just a scholar, as much as I identify as those things. I need to set boundaries and respect those boundaries. I need to know my limitations. Anna reminded me of that maybe 2 days ago when I wasn't relaxing enough or practicing enough self-care. I think a lot of our mentoring depends not only on who we are and what we do, but where we are in our careers. And I still lean on my mentors for support, but I also try to pay it forward by offering that support to newer scholars and newer teachers in the field.
Hi everyone, I'm Claudia Marshall, Anna Roseboro's co-writer for Planning with Purpose, a handbook for new college instructors, to be published soon by Rowman and Littlefield. More on that later. Thanks for joining us today across the time zones. We really appreciate your interest and participation. Thanks to Kia Richmond and all our contributors. Their experiences and insights validate the importance of collaboration for successful teaching and learning. A special mention goes to Jose Galindo Montalongo for his reading of Jose Luis Caño's reflection. Like Anna, I've been mentored by both veterans and less experienced colleagues. District and building level administrators, as well as colleagues across the curriculum, have supported me throughout my career. All have shared resources and insights into new methods, materials, and management techniques. We've searched for solutions to challenges brought about by the demands of online learning and concerns with more universal problems affecting morale. Time management and handling the workload are still relevant, maybe even more so with the context of today's changing dynamics. Prioritizing personal as well as professional needs is vital. No matter the subject, our knowledge of content benefits students when we use appropriate methods, relevant materials, and effective management strategies in our instruction. What ties together methods, materials, and management is mentoring, and that connects to morale. Think of a mentor as an advisor, counselor, guide, or guru, and then the connection between mentoring and morale becomes much clearer. Today's session provided perspectives on the benefits of mentoring and collaborating, enhancing instruction, and serving our students. You already know the value of your membership in NCTE, or you wouldn't be attending this convention. My membership connected me with Anna, and our shared experiences, along with Roseboro's influence and inspiration, led to our research for Planning with Purpose, a handbook for new college instructors. Planning with Purpose and its companion website provide support for new educators and veterans who've shifted grade level or course assignment, helping them navigate new journeys in their careers. You'll find details on methods, materials, and management to boost your morale, making your travels through teaching a little easier. Please stay with us for the Q&A. Video of this session will be available on the NCTE convention website for 60 days. Thanks so much for joining us today.